Welcome to the Spiritual Download. This channel is formerly known as the Library of Humanity. I did the name switch to spice things up, but also to make it a little bit more specific to let you know that this is an advanced spiritual journey channel. So if you are on an advanced spiritual journey, I want you to subscribe because we're going to talk about, discuss, and experience some of the deepest aspects of humanity and the universe in this channel. I'm really excited to present to you guys as the first video from the Spiritual Download is that this is the truth of the universe, and being human, we are combining the meaning of the universe and the meaning of being human together into the one grand theory, a unified theory, a spiritual theory that I'm going to describe in this video here. I wanted to show you guys this. I'm a little bit tired, but I have a root beer here, a little bit of straight sugar to the guts, straight sugar to the blood. So without further ado, let's get down to business. The first thing I want to convince you of is that the universe is perfect. So the thing or the non-thing, God, you can call it the creator, divine intelligence. This is what created the universe, and it created the universe perfectly. There's a philosopher named Leibniz, and Leibniz not only said that the universe is perfect, but that this is the best possible universe that could exist. So there is an article. I was a philosophy major in university, and there is an encyclopedia called the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. If you're really into philosophy, I suggest looking at these articles for, I would say, reliable sources. And this article is called Leibniz on the Problem of Evil. So the problem of evil can be kind of a boring topic if you are an advanced spiritual seeker. However, Leibniz is probably the most important thinker in this area because he claims that this is the best possible universe that could exist. So basically his argument is that it's the best possible universe because it's extremely diverse, okay? And in my perspective, it's actually diversifying. This complex universe is becoming more and more complex. And that this complexity is universal beauty. So beauty, love, complexity is all of the same thing. The universe is manifesting itself into everything that it can be, okay? And not only that, it decided to be that way from one simple law, which is intelligence, okay? And part of intelligence is consciousness. So the other aspect of his argument is that this is the best universe in its perfection because A, it's complex, and B, it comes from simple laws. Okay, so think about if you created a city from scratch, like a model, okay, like a model city, you're making the map, and you're making it really complex. You have all of these different laws, right, and a lot of different rules that you're making this city out of. However, God, or the creator, literally just brought the universe into being, and 13.8 billion years later, there's a human being. Came out of almost nowhere, right? But it came out of this law called intelligent consciousness, okay? And it's an infinite intelligent consciousness, okay? And that brought about an insane amount of complexity that is continuing to be all that it can be in all possibilities. So in this universe, there's an insane amount of diversity, and things can kind of become anything based on just the simple law of intelligence and consciousness. Okay, so I want to read you a little bit more from Leibniz, because I want to convince you that this is the best universe that can exist. Okay, so I'm going to read here, quote, "The core of Leibniz's solution to the underachiever problem is straightforward. Leibniz argues that God does not underachieve in creating this world because this world is the best of all possible worlds." So they're going to use the word world, however, really what it is universe. Okay, because Leibniz and a lot of philosophers come from like the 1600s, but we're talking about universes here in the 21st century. Okay, quote, "Many thinkers have supposed that commitment to the claim that this world is the best of all possible worlds follows straightforwardly from monotheism. Because God is omnipotent and omniscient, nothing can prevent him from creating the best world. and his omnibenevolence, meaning he's all good, obliges him to create the best world. So the created world is the best world. So that's the basic synopsis of Leibniz. But let's get into more detail. What reason, Leibniz asks, does the critic have for thinking that number 2 is true? So number 2 again is this world is not the best of possible worlds. So Leibniz was trying to reject that claim. When Leibniz addresses this issue, he usually has the critic say something along the following lines. Surely this world is not the best possible world, since we can easily conceive of possible worlds that are better. Take some token instance of suffering, the tragic bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Surely a world without that event would be better than the actual world. And there is no reason why God couldn't have created the world without that evil event. Thus, this is not the best possible world. Okay, so how would Leibniz respond to this? Leibniz responds to this sort of criticism comes in 2 stages. First, Leibniz says that while we can think of certain token features of this world that in and of themselves might be better than they are, we do not know whether it is possible to create a better world lacking those features, because we can never be certain of the nature of the connections between the token events in question and other events in the world. If we could improve or eliminate the token event in question without otherwise changing the world, we might well have a better world. Unfortunately, we have no way of knowing whether such a change to the token event would leave the world otherwise unchanged, or might instead make things, on balance, worse. So this part of the reading is extremely deep. So even though that human beings perceive that there are evil acts, in aggregate, this universe is completely perfect. Okay, because you would think that I wish I lived in another universe where I didn't suffer. Okay, so but the idea is if another universe didn't have you, we have no idea what would the other universe would look like, and it would actually be less perfect because it's not this universe. This is the universe where everything is good, but however it includes your suffering, okay, and the suffering of other people. However, in aggregate, the universe is an extremely perfect place. It's absolutely perfect, and it's the best. And because we, from our little human minds, are judging our suffering as evidence that the universe is not perfect, okay? But your little life is infinitesimal. It's minuscule. It's so tiny that you can't make that standard of because I'm suffering, the universe is not perfect. Okay, the universe is perfect because of its insane, immense diversity. And it needs to experience all possible experiences, including the idea of overcoming suffering, experiencing the challenges so that you can experience the overcomings. So you can experience the valleys so that you can experience the mountains. Because mountains don't exist without valleys. Light does not exist without dark. You need to have all possible experiences in order for God to learn about himself or herself. That's the point of the universe, is God to be considered everything, manifested himself into all things. So all the things are God. Okay, so that's the basic premise of my argument, is that all things are God. And God is one thing. All these things are the same as that one thing. So there's no difference between the universe and its perfection and God in his perfection. You are also that perfection. I'm going to get into that in more detail in the second part of my argument. So stick around. So next, second quote. Second, examples such as these are deceptive because they presume that God utilizes standards of world goodness that he may not in fact use. For example, it may presume that a world is good only if each part taken in isolation is good, a standard we have seen that Leibniz rejects. Or it might presume that a world is good only if human beings enjoy happiness in it. Leibniz argues in numerous texts that it's parochial to think that human happiness is the standard whereby the goodness of the world is to be judged. a more reasonable standard, according to Leibniz, would be the happiness of all sentient beings, meaning all consciousness, the well-being of consciousness in aggregate. Okay, so quote, a more reasonable standard, according to Leibniz, would be the happiness of all sentient beings. But once we admit this, it may turn out that the amount of unhappiness in the created realm is quite small. Given that for all we know, the sentient beings on earth might constitute a very small percentage of the sentient beings created by God. Here Leibniz includes not only preternatural beings, such as angels, but also the possibility of extraterrestrial rational beings. There is disagreement among Leibniz scholars about the basis for judging the goodness of worlds. Various scholars have defended one or more of the following. The best world is the one that maximizes the happiness of rational beings. Okay? The best world is the one that maximizes the quantity of essence, okay, meaning diversity. The best world is the one that yields the greatest variety of phenomena governed by the simplest set of laws. Okay, so that's number 3. That's the one that we're looking at here. Let me read that again. The best world, the best universe, this universe, is the one that yields or produces the greatest variety of phenomena, so diversity of things, governed by a simple set of laws. Okay, namely, putting intelligence and consciousness into existence, and it just creates some things like planets, human beings, dark holes, atoms, anything that you can think of, all of the magic that you study in science, all of the magic that you study in social studies class, all historical events. Think about all of the history that has ever happened, and that was created by a simple set of laws, namely consciousness, intelligence, creating simplicity, yet extreme complexity. All right, so I'm going to continue reading. Quote, there is scholarly dispute about whether Leibniz believed that the maximization of the happiness or virtue of rational beings is one of the standards by which God judges the goodness of the world. In part, the dispute over this standard hangs on whether or not it is compatible with the more metaphysical standards embodied in, and since it is these more metaphysical standards that Leibniz seems to endorse most consistently, in some cases, Leibniz writes as if the standard of happiness is fully compatible with the more metaphysical criteria. For example, within a single work, The Discourse on Metaphysics, Leibniz entitled Section 5, What the Rules of the Perfection of Divine Conduct Consist in, and that the simplicity of the ways is in balance with the richness of effects. And he entitled Section 36, God is the monarch of the most perfect republic, composed of all minds, and the happiness of the city of God is his principal purpose. So Leibniz seems to advance both standards in the same work. Okay, so this part, section 36, I want to read that again. So God is the monarch. So God is the king of the most perfect republic. God is the king of the most perfect country or city, made up of all minds, all conscious things. And the happiness, the well-being of this country created by God is his principal purpose. So the well-being of everyone in America in aggregate is increasing. That doesn't mean that you're not suffering or that you're not extremely happy. In aggregate, on average, people are becoming happier and happier. That doesn't mean that you're going to lose your job tomorrow and be extremely unhappy. In aggregate, everything is becoming happier and happier. And in this universe, it's the happiest universe that could exist, that could possibly exist, because of its insane diversity and its insane simplicity in how it was, in the laws that created the insane diversity and beauty. Quote, whatever position one comes to hold on this matter, Leibniz often points to the more metaphysical standards as the ones God utilizes in assessing the goodness of worlds. But there is further controversy over exactly which metaphysical standard. Leibniz endorses. In general, Leibniz holds that God creates the world in order to share his goodness with created things in the most perfect manner possible. I got to read that again. God creates the world in order to share his goodness with created things in the most perfect manner possible. In the light of the fact that created beings, in virtue of their limitations, can mirror the divine goodness only in limited respects, God creates a variety of things, each of which has an essence that reflects a different facet of divine perfection in its own unique way. It's extremely deep. Let me read that again. In light of the fact that created beings, or for example humans, in virtue of their limitations, because human beings are naturally limited, we can mirror the divine goodness. We are the vehicles of divinity. God created humans so that we could create more infinite intelligence. Okay. For example, the will to survive, our egos. Our egos are divine. Our egos are divine because our egos is what maintains humanness, and that humanness can one day evolve into something even greater. Everything is in constant evolution. Humanity actually doesn't exist. It's all just the universe evolving and diversifying. Okay. However, we interpret ourselves as humans. So the purpose of our life is to mirror God's image, or to glorify God by being your true self, because you're an aspect of God. Okay, you are this universe. Actually, you completely are this universe. However, God gave you the gift of also being a human being at the same time, and that this human being, your job is to be your best self and glorify God by helping to diversify, helping to create more intelligence for God. We are the slaves to God in the most beautiful way. It is a divine relationship between the slave and the master. God, the master, or the universe, the master. Human slave is the vehicle. So we are driving God's glory, or we are driving God's will to know himself. Okay, it is our project. It is the project of you and me to bring about Godness. And even though God is perfect, he's becoming even more perfect through the human being, through the universe, through diversifying, through complexity. This is how we are glorifying God. We don't glorify God just by praying. You glorify God by going to work. You glorify God by sleeping, doing human things. Okay, because in the future, human beings are going to help create more love, more diversifying love. Okay, so this is exactly what I mean by point 2. So I started with point 1, the meaning of the universe. What is the meaning of the universe? Is God created perfection, and that God wanted to know more about himself because he has to be everything. So he split himself into a million pieces that we call the universe. The universe is these 10,000 things, as they say in Zen. Okay, the 10,000 things represents the universe. So now we have the universe. It started with God and infinite potentiality, meaning it was just God and himself, but he decided to become absolutely everything. Therefore, he split himself into 10,000 pieces, 10,000 things. We have the universe, and he just put in the laws of intelligence and consciousness. Those are the only laws that exist. After that, then physics was created, then chemistry was created, and then biology was created, and then psychology was created. And now we have spirituality, where human beings are separate, yet we're becoming God again. We're realizing through our consciousness that, wow, we are God. Okay? And that's what I'm here to talk about and to discuss and to realize, is that our human meaning is to be our best self, to glorify God, and to bring about this project of perfection, the project of this masterful plan, the most beautiful possible city or universe that can exist. Okay, so we finished off where it says, well, it's talking about God's purpose for limitedness, okay, and like human beings, so that we can, quote, mirror the divine goodness only in limited respects. God creates a variety of things, each of which has an essence that reflects a different facet of divine perfection in its own unique way. Since this is God's purpose in creating the world, it would be reasonable to think that maximizing the mirroring of divine goodness in creation is the goal that God seeks to achieve. So God's purpose in the world would be reasonably to think that maximizing the mirroring of divine goodness. So this is the diversifying, maximizing the mirroring of divine goodness in creation. So the purpose of the universe is creation, creating, and you're creating new ways that God can exist. Okay, it can exist as a root beer, right? My thirst, God exists as my thirst, my tiring voice. And this is the goal that God seeks to achieve. And this is, in fact, is one of the standards Leibniz seems to endorse. We might call this the maximization of essence standard. Okay, so this quote, maximization of essence, is basically maximizing the possibilities of what God can be in essence. So God's essence, what can God's essence become? Through God's potentiality at the beginning of the universe, He created the universe in simple laws, and the game of the universe became, all of a sudden now we have human beings, for example, or animals, like my dog, my mom's dog, Nissa here. So it's all about dancing. By being yourself, you are dancing with God to learn about yourself and God. So when you are learning about yourself, God is learning about Himself at the same time, because your mind is God. Okay, it's not the complete version of God, because you have not realized that actually your mind is equal to God. But we perceive our minds to be limited versions of God. So that's basically what we are, is limited versions of God, because in our essence, it's the same as Godness. Okay. However, human beings are not ready to realize that they are God, because they would die. You would have no ego. Okay, but the purpose of an ego is to be a human and to increase possibilities for God's essence to be maximized. In any event, Leibniz holds that we are simply unable to know how changing certain events would change the world's capacity to meet the standards of goodness. Okay, so a lot of people are worried again about the fact, because evil exists for human beings, that this universe is not perfect. However, for example, Voltaire talked about this in Candide. The underachiever problem cannot get off the ground unless the critic is able to defend the claim that this world is not the best possible world. It should be noted that Leibniz's approach to the underachiever problem therefore seems to be immune to the line of criticism pressed by Voltaire in Candide, namely that it is obvious that this world is not the best possible world because there are so many manifest evils in it. Leibniz does not believe that each individual event is the best possible event, and he does not think that it is possible for finite minds to demonstrate that every individual event must be a part of the best possible world. Rather, he believes that the world as a whole is the best possible world. In any event, on Leibniz's view, our inability to know how changing certain events in the world would affect other events, and our inability to know how such changes would affect the overall goodness of the world, make it possible to defend the claim that the manifest evils in the world constitute evidence that this is not the best possible world. Okay, so enough for that reading. A lot of things are said in that reading that go to the core of meaning of the universe and of human beings. Overall, that is the theory, the unified theory, because a lot of times in philosophy, there has been the God-centered view of purpose, okay, and then the soul or human-centered view of purpose, and that those two have been separate. Okay, so for example, the God-centered view is the religious view that the purpose of the universe is God, glorifying God. The other side of the view is the humanistic view, known as existentialism or other similar views, where actually the center of meaning is just the human being creating meaning inside of a meaningless universe. Okay, so the wrong view that existentialism has is that they assume that the universe is meaningless. Okay, it is meaningless in one sense, but the fact that it's meaningless gives it an insane amount of meaning because of the absolute freedom. Okay, so a lot of people misconstrue the fact that if something has meaning, therefore there's limitations to it, that it has to be a certain way. But actually the most perfect meaning, the perfection of meaning, is that it can be anything in a possible universe. It can be any possible thing, which is absolutely true. We have not completed the universe. We have no idea what's going to happen in the universe. Okay, but for certain, the universe could also become could manifest itself in many different universes. Okay, really, I'm talking about existence, not necessarily the universe, because there are probably many, many, many millions, billions of universes in the realm of existence. So existence is like this. Our universe could be like this. Okay, so we are living in this universe, and it is a perfect universe, and there are multiple varieties of perfect universes per se. So that is another thing to think about. But that's the idea: is existentialism is part right, and the God-centered view of meaning is part right. However, I've tried to combine the two, saying that your purpose is the same as God's purpose, to learn about God. You are God. You are an aspect of God. You are a separate, limited version of God. However, your purpose is serving God's purpose. Your purpose is to be a vehicle through which God realizes himself and yourself, and to realize that you are God and God is you. God is everything. You are everything. It is all non-duality, meaning oneness. So if you like the video, you can click the like button. If you have questions, which you probably do, comment below. Hopefully I'll have time to respond to those questions. Thanks for watching the Spiritual Download. This has been a great first video. I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.